Hello and welcome to In the Hyperloop. My name is Blake. It's been some time since we last did a video update, but we're just going to basically go through the last June, July, and a little bit into August of Hyperloop updates. And if you want to follow and subscribe, definitely please do so. Reach out to us if you also want to do an interview. If you're helping build a Hyperloop pod for a SpaceX pod competition team, if you are wanting the Hyperloop in your region, or if you have questions, you can always join in on this live show. So let's kick it off. First, we're going to start off with the Hard Tech Fund. This is an initiative that I'm helping promote to have a research conference, basically. It's coming up soon. There's going to be a number of dates actually that you can take part in. Simply though, there's 3 tiers of tickets. Those are those that are doing research on the Hyperloop right now, like a pod competition team or feasibility team, or anything else that has something to do with academic research and academia. Then there's the stakeholder organization, and these are groups that might build components for a Hyperloop pod competition team, or are wanting to invest in Hyperloop companies, or are Hyperloop companies themselves, or groups that would like a Hyperloop in their backyard. And then there's interested viewer categories of tickets. The reason why there's these kinds of 3 different kinds of tickets is because they will be voting on during this research paper submission for the universities that are doing actual hard research on the different technological parts of the Hyperloop. The 3 days that this Hyperloop conference that will be going on is August 17th through the 24th. You'll be voting for the top 10 papers that are going to have different presentations on in each days, and then the papers that get voted on the most will be able to present, and they'll be receiving more feedback from the stakeholder organizations, which are component suppliers of Hyperloop parts and Hyperloop companies. Yeah, you'll be getting lots of good feedback. So yeah, day 1, it's from 1 p.m. and this is Universal Coordinated Time, so Greenwich Mean Time. So just be aware of that if you're in California, which you'll be waking up very early, or if you're in India, you'll be up late at night watching this. And there'll be paper discussions on propulsions, pod control systems, power managements within a Hyperloop pod, battery and fuel storage systems, safety setups for the use of the track. And then day 2, there'll be panel discussions for propulsion methods led on by the highest voted research paper, panel discussion for control systems, battery systems, and then track setup. And then August 29th, this is more, not so much the engineering stuff, but more the business development stuff, scaling real-life Hyperloop and engineering and development. So day 1 will be lightning talks on different modes, models for pod interiors. We've seen a lot of different diversity from Heart Hyperloop pod interior to a Virgin Hyperloop 1 pod interior to a Transpod Hyperloop pod interior. Then there'll be lightning talks on different modes of pod energy development and pod management and ticketing, and a special session on Hyperloop fundraising models. And then day 2 and day 3, there'll be more just sessions if you want to discuss more about. And then there'll be a summary white paper released at the end of this conference in case you missed it, and all of the videos of the presentations will be made online. So yeah, it's a really fascinating thing that I'm really happy to help out with and promote because there hasn't been a pod competition this year, of course, and there's not many other times that you can, share your hard research if you're working on a subsystem of a Hyperloop pod. And we do look forward to other Hyperloop research symposium in the next couple of years. later this year actually, and some other opportunities to present. But this is just a good way to kind of get out there and get your research known and practice a little bit as well. Um, but yeah, there will be some grading, and this is kind of still being decided, of how the research paper guidelines, and you can view all of this um, on the Eventbrite page, but also it'll be added to the hardtechfund.com/hyperloop page. So yeah, going forward, there's been a lot of news. We're just going to kind of go through the Twitter feed of our retweets, basically. Um, Strathloop, which is a Glaswegian group, is new to the Hyperloop competitions. They are starting to put together a team and working hard on creating the uh, foundation of their new group. Of course, they're not the only Hyperloop group. There's the group from Edinburgh, HypeEd, that's also doing this, but they're getting off the ground and have a strong uh, team framework and a lot of interest in Glasgow of their Hyperloop pod competition team. Also, The Boring Revolution, which is another YouTube channel, has been doing a lot of really good, interesting videos on the Boring company's competition for tunneling. And I'd highly recommend you give out the Boring Revolution a follow on YouTube, because they have really up-to-date and in-depth analysis of the tracks or the different tunneling projects around with the Boring company. There's been a lot of hype and a lot of interest about the U.S. Department of Transportation's new um, uh, uh, feasibility and safety updates that are coming out of Washington and allowing the US government to invest in Hyperloop projects, because it is so similar to rail. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight this lobbyist, Liz, who does a lot of work on the Ohio region and Hyperloop TT in getting US Department of Transportation uh, around to supporting Hyperloop in the United States, and other groups like Virgin Hyperloop One have also been lobbying quite a bit. Hyper Poland is doing a number of events, and let me just translate this. Rail transport is just entering new tracks. This is all due to a startup to see great potential in, and so yeah, there's just a lot of promotion on Hyper Poland lately. So keep on that, and of course, look into registering for the Hyperloop Symposium. Um, that'll be coming in soon. Um, and Spirit Aero, this is a really interesting aerospace company that has signed an agreement with Virgin Hyperloop One to help build the pods of Virgin Hyperloop One. And they're doing a lot of press because of the COVID impact and loss of business revenue for manufacturing airplanes, because of air travel has really sunk. They are now looking into and promoting their partnership with Virgin Hyperloop One. And of course, the Boring Revolution tweeted out, about the Boring Company's station between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, and how they're doing a lot of possible tunneling in the future to connect these two cities. Hyper Poland again, showing off their technology and tilting mechanism. Because they are doing a phased approach, they are building on existing railway lines to have their pods go on, and then eventually going into a tunnel that will have no air in it. And so yeah, they're trying to promote the phased approach, which is really interesting. And a lot of interest about the pandemic and the fate of high-speed rail or Hyperloop, and how the Hyperloop companies are really trying to cash themselves as small modal on-demand traveling, so you're not crammed into a 200 plus person airplane, you're just in a small pod of about 10, 15 people, and how uh, they're differentiating themselves with airlines. And we, of course, did a webinar on COVID and the future of Hyperloop previously, so check that out in the other videos that we've done. Virgin Hyperloop, retweeted by Mig Hyperloop, how resiliency with Hyperloop in the age of COVID and not having to everybody go to a downtown, but connecting, smaller cities together or regions together with a Hyperloop. And what does that mean for resiliency? And another promoter for Hyperloop TT, Hyperloop Ohio, promoting Secretary Ellen Chow's U.S. Department of Transportation's guidelines for regulations. We haven't yet really dug in deep about this, but we will in the future. But I'd highly recommend you check out this article recommended by them. Delft Hyperloop, of course, is working really hard and sharing a lot of safety frameworks on Hyperloop. And particularly, they had this article on fire safety posted on to their Hyperloop Connected website. And I would highly recommend you give it a read. By far, they're the most forward with different contingencies and disaster planning for Hyperloop. It's really fascinating. And all of these safety issues need to get sorted eventually. So give that Hyper-Connected article a read. Edinburgh University's Hyperloop team is doing really well still. And this is a really interesting edX talk by one of their team members, propulsion project manager, on Hyperloop. So I'd definitely recommend that 10-minute YouTube video. And Virgin Hyperloop 1 at the same time as the information about the Department of Transportation's support of Hyperloop. We're going full forward with getting interviews, and this one was on the Hill regarding Jay talking about Virgin Hyperloop 1 and their future work and how they really do see the sustainability of Hyperloop working with other modes of transportation and supporting, bike infrastructure to support, a new sustainable future and not repeat, the highway building of the past. So I'd highly recommend you give that a watch from the Hill. This is really interesting. The Swiss Consulate General of Atlanta tweeted out their support for SwissPod, the startup in Switzerland for connecting all the Swiss cities. So that's really great to see. And STM Loop from Morocco is talking about connecting Morocco and Spain with the Hyperloop. HyperEd is reaching out and trying to hire an outreach director. Excuse me. And this is really interesting because we've seen a lot of interest in like Delft Hyperloop supporting outreach of Hyperloop, and I now see HyperEd trying to do the same and just trying to get the local community and the global community more supportive of Hyperloop. Excuse me, I got a frog stuck in my throat. Delft Hyperloop, this was a huge thing. They had a test track test of their pod, and it reached 360 kilometers an hour within 300 meters on their open air record. It's just really fascinating accomplishment, and they want to go for the world record. So good job, Delft Hyperloop, for following up and broadcasting that live. It was really amazing. Again, Strathloop creating a lot of buzz around their members and getting all the foundation stuff figured out for the next pod competition. Dubai Media Office is really supporting Hyperloop, which is interesting because they want to support DP World as well and focus on the Virgin Hyperloop 1's cargo pod to connect the Middle East and all the ports in the Middle East together, and really solve the logistics problem of these massive cargo ships and port operations. So, excuse me again. But we haven't heard much of anything directly from DP World on their cargo pod or any other further developments like that. And of course, the Hyperloop pod competition teams were reminiscing of 1 year ago at the last pod competition, like Texas Guadalupe. This is really interesting. Delta Hyperloop's creating more content specifically for new people that are interested in about the Hyperloop, and they're, very open that a lot is not known, and they're still developing it. So it's really refreshing to see that kind of video content. And a question from Mahadi: I think Hyperloop is a good way for transportation in Mars, or even better than Earth. What do you think? Well, this is a good question. This was asked actually to Elon Musk at the last pod competition. Unfortunately, we didn't get any video of it, but there might be some video of the question and answer session of Hyperloop on Mars or on the moon. And of course, you don't have a vacuum on Mars or the moon, but the same, you know, uh, magnetic levitation applies and could really work, and he was all for it. So yeah, I'd highly recommend you try to find the question and answer series from the last Hyperloop pod competition, because Elon Musk spoke directly about it. Again, Black and Veitch, congratulations about the Hyperloop milestones from U.S. Secretary Ellen Chao. And yeah, their regulation guidance. Again, we don't know much about this. We haven't really looked deep into the guidance documents, but a lot of these third-party sponsors that are building components for Virgin Hyperloop 1 or doing engineering feasibility studies like AECOM are supporting Virgin in getting this recognized by the Department of Transportation. And Alberta Loop from Canada, they want to do a lot of outreach for students, so that's really good. Juan Vincent from Zelaros is celebrating the news from the U.S. Department of Transportation's Net Council, and including Hyperloop. Ben Cook, who works for Hyperloop TT, and he says, today was a historic day for Hyperloop movement, and official designation of Hyperloop under the FRA would work. The work we have done in the last few years had reached a critical milestone. So that's great to see. Hyperloop Edinburgh is again, doing a little bit of outreach of what the Hyperloop is. And Delft Hyperloop supporting Heart Global is allowing them, after their test of the test track outside, they put their pod into this vacuum tube to better understand and do research on what the electronics would do if it was in a vacuum. And more information on the Net Council. And feel free to ask more questions in the chat. Tomb Hyperloop, they are formerly the Hyperloop pod competition team that won all the competitions, and they are working to do more research about Hyperloop and build a full test tube and full-size prototype for Hyperloop. We've really seen a lot of European universities create master's programs kind of around the research that Hyperloop requires. So it's a huge paradigm shift between the American universities that are also trying to build Hyperloop pods, because these European students can focus full-time on Hyperloop research, because they've tailored their degree around that. And Delft Hyperloop, of course, is doing a lot of PR around their open air test track. And a lot of other Hyperloop teams are reminiscing 1 year. And this was just a really fun event to witness. Thanks again, Delft, for broadcasting it live. Um, and it was unfortunate because, yeah, they recognized due to a motor control issue, the pod came to a standstill after 299 meters. So it could have gone even faster, but it stopped. Excuse me. And it went really fast down the track, and it was just really fun. So I'd highly recommend you watch the entire test. Um, and yeah, Hyper Poland is really getting out there to join events or have events about their strategic planning of Hyper Poland. Continuum Industries, this is really fascinating. They are formerly a part of HyperEd, but branched out. They are now making software to plan infrastructure, transportation, and other projects. So you don't have to spend as much time with, uh, you know, making individual maps. They have a system that can bring all the maps of infrastructure into one plan and platform to then map out a route for Hyperloop. And hopefully we'll learn more about this. But they, in between June and July, they announced a lot more information. So give them a watch and drop them a line if you want to find out more. Al Jazeera did a very great interview segment on Heart Hyperloop as an alternative to short haul flights. I think Heart Hyperloop was the first kind of Hyperloop group to really announce that they are a competitor to short haul flights, and then all the other Hyperloop teams um, joined the bandwagon on that. But they were really working on a partnership with Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam to envision a future of less short haul flights and more long distance regional flights. TUM Hyperloop was recruiting, and I think they still are seeking recruits if you are in university. And Sultan Ahmed bin Sulman, who is the CEO of DP World, the cargo pod for Virgin Hyperloop, wanted to wish Sir Richard Branson a very happy birthday. And this is the final photo from Delft Hyperloop, which was a great event. And yeah, a lot more press that TUM Hyperloop wants to build a test track in Bavaria by the end of 2021. And they released, these renders of the pod. This looks very similar to, excuse me, um, uh, Virgin Hyperloop or Transpod in Canada or Hyperloop TT. The pod is resting on the ground. This is not something like Heart Hyperloop where the pod is hanging from the ceiling. And yeah, they're finally presenting the new TUM Hyperloop program powered by the Technical University of Munich with strong support from the Bavarian government. And this is a light years away from the universities in the United States where you might not have strong support from the local government or from the university. So it's really exciting to see TUM Hyperloop running with this and getting that set up. Yeah, we're just gonna scroll a little bit further. Oh yeah, Hyperloop had a webinar with European members of Parliament to discuss future mobility. I'd recommend you give that a watch. Yeah, Hyperloop TT had a study published by this organization, TÜV Süd, about the milestones for regulation and safety and adoption of Hyperloop. Unfortunately, the study is about $1,000 or €1,000, so it's a little expensive, but I'd highly recommend you give it a check. Okay, some more chats. What do you think about the safety factors? Again, check out hyperloopconnected.org, or if you have €1,000, check out this feasibility study from Hyperloop TT. Safety is so important. Yep, I agree with that. Will there be a Hyperloop competition this year from Oliver? That's a great question. Unfortunately, probably not. Definitely not. 2021 is what everybody's betting on, and we don't know if it's going to be in Los Angeles, or sorry, Las Vegas, or on a longer test track of like a couple miles, um, or a lot of the Hyperloop groups in Europe, a lot of the university teams want to build their own test tracks, and set that up. So stay tuned. I would definitely reach out to the European teams, and see if you can um, glean any information from them. And yeah, good questions about. Feel free to write more in the chat. I'll continue to check it every once in a while. But yeah, Delft Hyperloop doing a lot of promotion. Swissloop, one of the Hyperloop teams from Switzerland, is still recruiting for the Hyperloop or SpaceX Pod competition next year. We hope that does happen. Um, and yeah, we're just kind of going through here. Oh yeah, excuse me. Um, Delft Hyperloop had a really great, oh sorry, Heart Hyperloop had a really great YouTube, very brief, but it explores the cabin of the Hyperloop pod. So um, really interesting, and explains what the passenger will feel like, and I'd highly recommend you check it out. Um, this is interesting, a little bit of a um, history. Shervin Pishvar co-founded Virgin Hyperloop, um, and he's just wishing Virgin Hyperloop uh, good luck and um, bon chance with the announcement of um the Department of Transportation's findings on Hyperloop. And Kansas City Smartport, they want Virgin Hyperloop 1 to help build a test track in Kansas. There's also a couple others. There's been very little discussion last couple months about these American test tracks for Virgin Hyperloop 1. There was a lot of pressure from various local governments and state governments to build the test track, like even in North or South Carolina. Um, but yet we haven't heard a single thing about these test tracks in the United States, um, or the St. Louis, Missouri to Kansas. Yeah, we haven't heard anything, so stay tuned. Um, yeah, oh yeah, this is the announcement. Spirit Arrow's great partnership with Virgin um, to help build these pods. And of course, then July 7th, the Boring Company announced their Boring um, competition, and we haven't really looked lately to see if anything's changed on that. So yeah, if you have an interest in taking part in this challenge, feel free to reach out. We haven't heard a lot of buzz about this or other companies that are trying to join this competition, so we'll keep our eyes and ears. I think one of the German teams, maybe TUM Hyperloop, asked if anybody at the university was interested in taking part in the competition. They should get in touch with the Hyperloop team. Otherwise, I think the Hyperloop teams um, have enough on their plate and are maybe not going to assist in that boring competition. Um, Continuum Industries, had a great blog post about what infrastructure planners and designers need to know about evolving and how to optimize the tools to plan for these new infrastructure projects. So that's fascinating. And a lot of Swissloop going through all their sponsors of their past pod competition teams. This was an interesting interview with Andy from The Verge, who we've met at other SpaceX pod competition teams. Yeah, it was a very brief interview. Andy has been, focusing on um, a lot of transportation issues, and so yeah, I think he was able to give a pretty good interview to Jay, the ahead of version. And we're just gonna go through here a little bit more. Oh yeah, RLoop of course is the granddaddy of working remotely with a crowdsourced team of engineers, and they gave a really interesting talk about working remotely and Hyperloop and crowdsourced engineering. So check that out. Um, yep. So this was an interesting tweet back and forth about the Hyperloop Pod competition 2021, actually. So any news on the SpaceX Hyperloop Pod competition? Elon says we need to finish building a much longer vacuum tunnel for speed tests and probably have additional competition for the tunnel itself. That was the boring competition. Aiming for a 10-kilometer tunnel with lots of turns to approximate real-world tunnel. So yeah, thanks for Twitter user Ratana of asking the question about the Hyperloop Pod competition. And Delft Hyperloop, of course, released more information about their interior, which was really fascinating. And this was interesting. Their Virgin Hyperloop One is working with a university of and creating an artificial intelligence program around Hyperloop. So that was quite fascinating. And we're just gonna continue to go back in time. We're now at June. Let us know if you have more questions in the comments. HyperEd, of course, renamed their 2021 pod Greyfriars Poddy. Greyfriars is a small statue in Edinburgh with a dog, and again, Delft Hyperloop is doing just tons of testing on their systems and really going about the seriousness of and building out a Hyperloop pod. So good job. IDOM, which is an engineering group, is helping build the MagRail track for HyperPoland's transportation system. We haven't heard of any other future testing of HyperPoland, so we're fingers crossed. And this is the announcement of Spirit Airways helping build the pods. Through leveraging our values and core competencies of designing and manufacturing aerospace structures, many of the skills are transferable to produce Hyperloop, to the Hyperloop bogie. That's kind of funny. And Vegapod in India, they're building out extensive graphical user interfaces for pod communications. That's fascinating. So keep it up. And Continuum Industries in Edinburgh again is promoting that the work between their research partners and this professor Emma Hart in developing the algorithms for their engineering software. So that's really cool. And again, we haven't heard much of it. Other teams like Eurotube, which also is trying to be a nonprofit, but also build tubes in Switzerland for Hyperloop or vacuum transportation. And we would be remiss to talk about one of the Hyperloop companies from the UK. I don't see them here. Magro, I forget the exact name of the, but they are working hard in the UK to make a smaller Hyperloop pod system. And so yeah, there was a lot of news in early June about the European Union commitment on transportation and tourism to showcase and include Hyperloop in the transportation recovery plans. And the European Union giving back monies to European countries to include that for Hyperloop. And oh yeah, Magway. This is them. They've rebranded a little bit. They have a new website talking about delivering a greener future. They spoke at a conference, but they've definitely raised a lot of money um, so that their system can go from kind of, cargo uh, buildings to, end stores or other cargo buildings to make, um, delivery of parcels a lot more on demand and not so reliant on, uh, trucking. Um, so yeah, it's really interesting, and they have a 2020 internship program opened up right now, so check that out. But that kind of, I think, sums it up. Skypole, tweeted about their work with Heart Global, which has been fascinating, kind of a partnership. And I would highly recommend you check out Heart Global's substituting short haul flights with a European Hyperloop. They're really thinking down the road, of course. And we're just kind of going back. Oh yeah, Mork developed a Hyperloop study. This is Mid-Ohio Regional Partnership. I'd highly recommend you check out the results of that feasibility study. All very positive for Hyperloop. And, you know, this was more in line with a Virgin Hyperloop 1 system, not a Hyperloop Transportation Technology system, but definitely give it a look. And that kind of sums it up for news since June. We're back into May. We're quickly just going to look at our Instagram feed. A new group, Vomi, wants to develop Hyperloop. We're eagerly awaiting more information about them. But I think they're from Italy, and they want to connect some cities in Italy with a Hyperloop. Strathloop is presenting and having meetings of sub-teams, so that's interesting. Hyper Poland 2 days ago had an announcement of cooperating with a global company providing professional services of IDOM. So that's good to have a engineering and architecture company. HypeEd is showcasing their lateral suspension for their pod. It looked like a roller skate with a spring, but that's all custom. Davish Hyperloop, continuing our theme of celebrating our awesome women on our team. Today we are sharing a quote from a member of our Power sub-team. Here's what she said about her work on OneLoop. We're a group of a group of engineers with one goal, but a plethora of solutions. We are one team, but also a network of connecting a myriad of ideas. We are raw, uncensored talent, and OneLoop lets us unleash that onto the world. So that's really cool. Thanks, Oliver, for all these updates. Sorry, it's kind of bland and it's not a summary, but glad you could make it into the chat. Virgin Hyperloop 1 is really having more and more lofty verbosity about their PR. The ability to move will dictate the future of the human race. In fact, it may even save it. UC HyperExcite is showcasing starting August 11th, Meet the Team series. So good job, HyperExcite, for controlling your message around your team, and we look forward to those videos. Polymill MTL, Polytechnic from Montreal, is showcasing all the different locations of university teams on the Hypermap. Go check out Hypermap. They have a really great map of all the research universities and Hyperloop routes that are in theory right now, and so check that out. There's Davis Hyperloop, and we're just kind of continuing forward. There's been a lot of SpaceX news. Hyperloop TT, has this nice photo, excuse me, of the route from Pittsburgh to Chicago, going through a number of cities, and not a lot of information lately of that particular route, but we're looking forward to it. And we're just kind of going through, HypeEd again, showcasing their workstation, um, and everybody working pretty much remotely in the United States. It's not easy working on these Hyperloop pod competition teams. Ryerson Hyperloop showcasing graphic designer. And a lot of these Hyperloop teams are multidisciplinary. Um, Miriam says, what I love most about being a part of the team is that RAH is like a family. Everyone is so welcoming and inspiring. So yeah, Hyperloop requires a lot of different team members um, to kind of get the boat off the ground. And we're just kind of going. And this Department of Transportation news really is important, and we will do a much greater depth update on it. But it was quite important. Um, and that's about it. Let us know if you have any more questions in the chat. Um, a lot of people posting, 1-year anniversary shots. HyperPod X, who might be having a research symposium later on this year, showing off their pod to a minister. So that's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, a lot of these Hyperloop teams, posting about their last pod competition, we're in the Hyperloop is very thankful for following all these Hyperloop teams, and it's supporting each other, and everybody working together, and coming up to me when I would go at the pod competition and saying hello. So yeah, we're just really thankful for being a part of this story of Hyperloop development, and we're just seeing if there's any other news. It's from July 15th. Now we're back in. I think that's kind of it for news updates from Hyperloop. But we are happy to, reach out and do an interview. We're going to be definitely posting more updates about the Hard Tech Funds Research Symposium. But I would highly recommend you go sign up right now. You do have to select, dates, and then kind of choose what level of ticket you are. But I'd highly recommend it. This is totally free. It's just gonna cost you a little bit of time, but it's worth it to be a part of this and get practice. Showing your research that you've been working hard on. But that's about it from In the Hyperloop. We're sorry that this has been so long since we last did a video, and hopefully we'll try to do more videos like this. But hope you're having a good